Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Tender Journey Tarot. I'm Mel, and astrologer and tarot practitioner. And today we're going to be discussing the winter solstice and the introduction to Capricorn season. So I'm really excited to be chatting about this with you today. And I really hope that you get some benefit out of what we talk about. Without further ado, let's get started. So, I want to talk to you about something that's really specific that happened on December 21st, 2025. Even if you're not into astrology, I think you're going to feel this. December 21st is the winter solstice. It's the shortest day and longest night of the year. It's also when the sun moves into Capricorn, which is basically the get your life together, be productive, climb the ladder energy of the zodiac. But here's where it gets interesting. That same evening, there's this tension in the sky between the moon and Jupiter that's basically asking, do I push harder or do I finally let myself rest? The mountain or the ocean, right? Hustle or healing. And honestly, most of us are stuck in the middle, exhausted and confused. Okay, so let's talk about what the winter solstice actually is. It's the day when we're tilted the furthest away from the sun. It's also the darkest day of the year, and for those of us that live in the Northern Hemisphere. Ancient people were obsessed with this moment. They built stone circles and temples to track when it would happen. They'd light fires, they'd celebrate, because they understood something we've kind of forgotten, that the solstice is the turning point. This is when the darkness stops getting deeper and the light starts coming back. It's not dramatic, because starting December 22nd, yesterday, we get like a minute or two more of more daylight each day, but it's happening. The light is returning, even though we can barely tell, especially where I'm living, where the ground is covered by snow. And this happens right as the sun enters Capricorn, the zodiac sign that's all about hard work, discipline, and building things that last. Think CEOs, 5-year plans, New Year's resolutions, that kind of energy. Capricorn really gets a specific reputation. When people hear Capricorn season, they think, oh, time to be productive, time to set goals, time to get serious. And yes, that's a part of it. Capricorn is symbolized by a mountain goat, so it's always climbing, always moving upward, always working towards the summit. But here's what most people miss. The full symbol for Capricorn is actually a sea goat. It's half mountain goat, half fish. It climbs mountains, but also knows how to swim in deep water. It understands ambition and emotion and structure and flow. The problem is that in our culture, here in the United States, we only celebrate the mountain climbing part. We worship the grind. We celebrate people who work 80-hour weeks and hustle hard and never stop climbing. But that's not sustainable. And Capricorn, true Capricorn wisdom actually knows this, because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, the planet of time. And Saturn knows that anything worth building needs to last. You can't build something meaningful if you're burning out every 6 months. We have a transit that happens, Jupiter in Cancer, right? That same day the moon was in Capricorn, that mountain energy, that I need to be productive feeling was happening, but directly opposite Jupiter in Cancer in the sky. So what does that mean? Well, Jupiter is basically the planet of more growth, more abundance, more expansion. And it's sitting in Cancer right now, which is the most emotional, nurturing, and home and family sign of the zodiac. Cancer is water. It's the ocean. It doesn't care about your productivity or your achievements. Cancer wants to know, do you feel safe? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you being honest about what you actually need? So on the solstice, we literally have the moon in the climb the mountain sign, staring across the sky at Jupiter in the dive into the ocean sign. And we're caught in the middle, feeling both poles at once. This is the tension so many of us are living with right now. One part is like, I need to have my life together. I need to be more disciplined. I need to work harder, achieve more, build something with my life. Yet another part of you is like, I'm so tired. I just want to rest. I want to feel safe. I want someone to tell me I don't have to keep pushing so hard. And the culture we live in tells us that we have to pick one. You're either ambitious or you're lazy. You're either driven or you're soft. You're either climbing the mountain or you're giving up. Ugh. But what if that's a false choice? What if the whole point of this moment, the opposition in the sky, the solstice, the standing between the mountain and the ocean, is to realize that we need both? We're going to do a tarot pull for this energy and see what spirit has to offer us. I would like to pull from the oracle deck, the white light oracle. I use this deck specifically when we're in the middle of transits, when we're in the middle of transitioning between one state and another, right? And I find this deck extremely helpful for navigating such challenges. So let's go into that deck now and get our guiding card that will set the tone for this reading. Shuffle one more time. All right. We've got two cards that came out. Seraph of 963 hertz. There we go. And Beta of Spirit Wolf. Let's get the key themes from both of these cards. Oh, if I have the booklet that comes with these cards, which I don't seem to see, I'm going to have to kind of look up what these cards symbolize so that we can get a firm idea of what the tone for this reading is. So bear with me 1 minute. I'm looking it up to get the key themes because I do not have the booklet with me. Okay, so let's see what key themes these cards symbolize, how that ties into the astrology around the solstice, and what that's telling us in relation to rest during Capricorn season. Hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can find. Okay, let's see if we can find that. All right, so yes, Seraph of 963 hertz, all right? So this card guides us to practice connecting with the profound joy that exists deep within us. It encourages us to pay attention to activities and experiences that bring you exquisite delight. And if you're unsure what those are, to explore and experiment to find them. This card also suggests calling upon higher frequencies and angelic assistance when needed, reminding you not to try to handle everything at once. Wise advice, especially during Capricorn season. Beta of Spirit Wolf. How perfect is this card? It emphasizes the need for rest and grounding. Beta here refers to the brainwave state of waking consciousness. So balanced use of this state requires intentional relaxation and frequent breaks from focus demanding activities. Only by giving yourself enough rest will you be able to cultivate the focus and motivation required to fulfill your life's path. This card suggests trusting your intuition and inner guidance, which provides lunar wisdom that looks beyond immediate circumstances to long-term soul-level outcomes. If that's not a perfect pairing for resting during Capricorn season, I have no idea what is. This is an ideal pairing here because it's telling us a couple of things. It's telling us that we can be ambitious without destroying ourselves. We can rest without giving up on our dreams. We can want things and still take care of ourselves. What does the tarot have to say to support this message? Or give us something completely different? We'll see. Let's pull a card. I think I want to understand what's the purpose of this rest right now, and what kind of climb are we preparing for, right? I think there's a practical need for this rest. And I think this is the kind of rest that actually changes things. I think it's structural. I think it's rest that we have to build into our lives, not squeeze in after we're already exhausted. I think that this is part of our architecture now, not just something we do when we're tired. I'm getting chills. What are we preparing for? What climb are we preparing for? And what is the purpose of this rest now? I think that's the question I want to know the answer to the most. Oh, Spirit, please be present with us, answer us, help us understand why rest is so important now, and to also understand collectively what climb we are preparing for. That was extremely... Let's try something else. I saw the Devil card pop up in my shuffle. It's the card of Capricorn. All right, I've got a couple of cards here. Let's see what we've got. We've got the Page of Swords upright, the Fool in reverse, the Nine of Swords upright, and the Ace of Wands in reverse. Okay, so let me take a minute to kind of digest this spread and kind of figure out what the message that the spread is telling us. So one thing I want to start off is with this ace. I'm going to go from left to right here, how I lay them on the table. So the Ace of Wands upright. How does this connect to the themes of rest, rejuvenation, taking a pause, right? But it's a intentional pause. How does that sort of amplify the message? Well, the Ace of Wands is literally about new beginnings. So it's kind of interesting to see this come up given the themes of rest, right? It's fire energy. It's raw potential, creative impulse. It's the moment where you feel called to start something that, oh, I have an idea kind of feeling before you figured out any of the details. The Ace of Wands is actually the perfect bridge between the mountain and the ocean, right? It's the spark that starts the climb. But it needs the mountain and the ocean to become something real. Think about it. You need the ocean to be emotionally honest about what you're being called to create. Is the spark authentic? Does it come from your soul? Or are you just chasing what you think you should want? You need the mountain, that Capricorn energy, to tell the spark, to take that spark and build something lasting with it, to give it structure, to give it discipline, to create a plan. The Ace of Wands showing up around the solstice now, right, is the darkest moment when the light begins returning. It's saying, yes, there is a new beginning here. Yes, you have fire and inspiration, but you're being asked to be intentional about where you direct that fire. So the Ace of Wands is that moment where you feel the call to build something, to start something new. But the question that we're being asked here is, Are we climbing the right mountain? Is this fire coming from genuine passion or from the part of you that is trying to prove something? The ocean reminds us to deep dive first, to feel whether this spark is real, to make sure you're rested and resourced enough to honor what needs to be born, what wants to come to life. The mountain reminds us that a spark without structure just burns out. That's the Saturnian lesson that we can capture from Capricorn. We need the discipline, the plan, the consistent effort to turn that inspiration into reality. And for that, we need to rest. We need to sit with ourselves to distinguish whether this path that we're walking is indeed the right one. The next card we got is the Nine of Swords, and we got that in the upright position. I'll show you the imagery on that right here. Whenever I see this card, I think of anxiety. I think of our minds constantly ruminating, right? Keeping us up late at night. Look at that imagery there. This is that person that sits up in bed at 3 a.m. with their head in their hands, can't sleep, right? Because their thoughts are spiraling. This is exactly what happens when we're stuck between the mountain and the ocean. The Nine of Swords is what it feels like to be caught in that tension with no resolution, right? You're asking yourself, should I be doing more? Should I be working harder? Am I not climbing fast enough? But also, I'm so exhausted. Why can't I just rest? Why do I feel guilty every time I stop? That's that ocean guilt. And then I don't know which one is right. What if I'm wasting my life? What if I burn out? What if I'm lazy? What if I'm missing my chance? All those thoughts, right? That's that mental torture of not being able to honor either side because we're too busy beating ourselves up about both. The Nine of Swords is what happens when we refuse to choose both. When we get stuck in that either or mentality and we think we have to be all mountain, all go, 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 or all ocean, right? All rest, all discipline, or all softness. So we lie awake at night. Our anxiety spirals because we're trying to do the impossible, be everything at once. And that's exactly what the Seraph of 963 Hertz warned us against. Doing everything all at once, while somehow still being something that, that disappoints people somehow, right? You're trying to not disappoint anyone. So in that effort, we're trying to be all things all at once. That isn't a sustainable practice. This is when the fears feel the loudest because there is nowhere else to hide. The card's actually telling us all those swords up on the wall, they're not actually stabbing the person. The person is torturing themselves with their own thoughts. The danger is in the mind, not in reality. What if the way out of the Nine of Swords isn't finally figure out what you should climb? Or, if you should climb the mountain, should I dive into the ocean? What if the way out is to stop making it a war in your head? To let yourself actually hold that paradox, to be both ambitious and tired, driven and scared, wanting to build something, but also desperately needing to rest. This card is saying your thoughts about the choice are worse than the choice itself. It's saying the darkest moment is right before the dawn, but you have to stop fighting the darkness to see the light that's coming. So this is the actual lived experience of anxiety that so many of us are feeling right now. We're worrying that we're doing it all wrong, no matter what they choose. Does that sound true for you? It sometimes is true for me. And it's a thought that lingers in the subconscious, right? The third card we got is the Fool. And we got the Fool in reverse. And I want to talk about how that pertains to the astrology that we're talking about. This card is also similar to a card of fearlessness. The card of a brand new start. It's telling me, and that concept of a brand new start, that fearlessness, is when the Fool is this way, right? We got it in reverse. So instead of leaping without looking, right? Or leaping into something that is new, the Fool in reverse is about being stuck at the edge of a cliff, unable to jump, right? Or leaping before looking, trying to escape the discomfort without any real awareness. The Fool in reverse says you're frozen and you cannot take the leap in either direction. You're standing at the edge between the mountain and the ocean, and you're just stuck, afraid to commit to the climb, afraid to surrender to the water, afraid that any choice will be the wrong one. On the other hand, it could mean that you're about to make a reckless leap just to escape the tension, right? Quit your job without a plan, blow up your life, make some impulsive decision because the anxiety of standing in the middle is too much to bear. So we have this spark, the Ace of Wands, showing us that there's genuine fire here, genuine desire to create and build something new as we move into this new year. But then the Nine of Swords shows up and we're in our heads about it, right? Anxiety is starting to spiral. Am I doing enough? Am I resting enough? Should I be climbing? Should I be feeling? What if I burn out? What if I waste my life? All of these thoughts. And then the Fool in reverse shows up, showing us what happens if we stay in this anxiety too long. We freeze. We can't move. We're standing at the edge of a cliff in that liminal space between the mountain and the ocean, between the old year and the new, and we're terrified to step forward in any direction. The Fool reverse is saying that we're so afraid of making the wrong choice that we're making no choice at all. Maybe it's, you're so desperate to escape the discomfort of not knowing that you're about to jump without looking, about to make some big dramatic change just to feel like you're doing something. But here's what the solstice teaches us. The darkness isn't asking us to jump yet. The longest night isn't asking you to have all the answers. It's asking you to stand in the unknown for a minute, to be with that tension, to let the Ace of Wands spark sit in your hands while you actually feel what's true. Now, if the Fool showed up this way, it would say, take that jump with trust. But showing up this way says you don't trust yourself yet. And maybe that's because you haven't been honest about what you actually need. You can't leap toward the mountain if you haven't acknowledged just how tired and exhausted you are. You can't dive into the ocean, right? If you haven't admitted what you're actually running from. This Fool card in reverse is our invitation to pause, to stop rushing toward a decision, to stand between the mountain and the ocean and just breathe. Let those Nine of Swords thoughts pass through without believing all of them. Hold that Ace of Wands spark without immediately needing to know exactly where it's going. The light starts coming in from the 22nd of December, right? But you don't have to have your entire life figured out by then. You're allowed to stay in the question a little longer. This is that analysis paralysis or recklessness that comes from not being able to hold both truths at once. Okay? Now we got our last card, the Page of Swords. This is the imagery of the card here, Page of Swords. What does that mean? What does the Page of Swords mean when it shows up in a reading like this? Well, if we look at the storyline so far, right, we've got that spark, we got the mental rumination, we have the freeze body response, right? The Page of Swords is the young student with a sharp mind, asking questions, looking for information. It's being curious. But pages are also inexperienced. They have the tool. Look, she's carrying the sword, which means they have the mind, right? The swords are about mental activity, but they're still learning how to wield that sword wisely. So here's a story I'm seeing. I'm seeing that you have the spark, the fire, the genuine call to create something, but your mind is in overdrive, spiraling with anxiety about whether you're doing it right or not. The Fool in reverse says, so now you're frozen. You can't take a leap. You're standing at the edge and you're paralyzed by all the what ifs. But your mind is trying to think your way out of this. You're analyzing, researching, gathering information, asking a million questions, saying, maybe if I just understand it better, I'll know what to do. Maybe if I read one more article, listen to one more podcast, pull one more card, I'll finally have the answer. Look what's in the subconscious. The Death card. The Death card is in our subconscious. And I didn't intend to pull this card at first. It hadn't occurred to me that I hadn't pulled the back of the deck card. So I'm going to pull that out. Underneath is the moon, by the way. The Death card, upright, in the subconscious position, tells us an interesting story. So let's start off with talking about what the Death card actually represents. And let's see how this connects to our mental ruminating in the Nine of Swords. Okay. So the Death card is what's underneath all of this. It's what's driving that Ace of Wands spark, that Nine of Swords anxiety. Here's what's happening. Something is dying. Something has to die. And subconsciously, we know it. This isn't about literal death. It's about transformation. It's the ending that has to happen before the new beginning can come. It's the old identity, the old pattern, the old way of being that can no longer continue, which means the Nine of Swords spiral is not about whether to climb the mountain or dive into the ocean. It's the subconscious knowing that choosing means something, letting something die. And the Fool in reverse at the edge that's frozen, that's the fear of transformation, the fear of who you become if you let the old version of yourself go. The Page of Swords, overthinking. That's trying to intellectualize your way around the grief, trying to think your way out of having to feel the loss. Here's what I think is done. I think it's the old definition of success because we're in Capricorn season, right? The version of making it that you've been climbing towards that doesn't actually fit who you are anymore. It could be the belief that you have to choose between ambition and tenderness, that you can either be driven or soft, productive or emotional, climbing or resting. It's that or energy. It could be the identity that we once held as the person who can handle it all without needing anything from anybody. Maybe it's that fantasy that someday when we finally achieve enough, we'll be allowed to rest. Or if we just rest enough, you won't have to want anything anymore. But here's what's really happening. Something is ending and we know it. That's what the anxiety is all about. It's the grief of letting go. This new cycle that's starting in the Ace of Wands here, you can't bring the old version of you into it. The light's returning, oh yeah, but something has to die in the darkness first. Maybe it's the either or energy, the whole framework that says that we have to choose between the mountain and the ocean, between building and feeling, between ambition and humanity. The Death card is saying that old way is over and it's already dying. That's why you have the Ace of Wands. There's a new spark to be born, but you can't hold on to the old identity and grab the new fire at the same time. The Nine of Swords here, anxiety, is actually grief in disguise. We're awake in the middle of the night, not because we don't know what to do, but because you do know, and you're mourning what you have to release to do it. The Fool is reversed like this, and it's frozen because stepping off that cliff means letting the old self die. And even if that old self was exhausted, even if it wasn't working to begin with, it was something you knew. And there's a certain safety in familiar suffering. The Page of Swords is asking all of those questions, because if you can stay in your head, you don't have to feel the loss yet. But the solstice, the longest night, the moment of maximum darkness, is this card. That's when things end. When the old year dies so the new one can begin. When the old light dies so the new light can return. You're not just choosing between the mountain and the ocean here. You're being asked to let something die so that a version of you who doesn't have to choose can be born. What needs to die isn't you. It's the story you've been telling yourself about who you have to be. And that explains why the tension feels so unbearable. It's not just a practical dilemma, it's an identity crisis. It's a death and rebirth happening in real time. And it connects perfectly to the solstice energy. The darkest night is death card energy. Something dies in the darkness. It's not a bug. It's the whole point. How does that land for you? How does that feel? I want to get some clarity on the transformation itself. I'm going to pull from my clarifier deck on the death card. Because there's a deep transformation that's happening, and I want us to be really crystal clear about what it is that's dying, and so that we have some instructions on what we have to let go. Two cards fell. Strength. Oh, double 9 of swords. This is a really big thing here. You see that confirmation here? Double 9 of swords. So that tells us that what needs to die is the mental rumination, that always questioning, which is not allowing us to actually take an action. And then we got the Strength card in reverse. So whenever I see the Strength card in reverse, I think of inner strength. When it's upright, I think of what we display on the outside, right? And with the Strength card in reverse, it's more so, do we have the inner willpower now? That inner strength that it will take to release these thoughts, this mental spiraling that we've been going through, right? This is about getting in touch with your inner power. This is about gentle courage. This is about depleting ourselves, trying to force our way through all of this, trying to push through this transformation instead of being gentle with ourselves through it. So when I see the Strength card in reverse, it's saying you're trying to force yourself to choose, force yourself to be productive, force yourself to even rest, force yourself to figure it out, force yourself to be okay with the endings, force yourself to have strength that you don't actually have right now. Look at this lion. You've been trying to lion, your own needs, your emotion, your exhaustion, instead of working with it. You've been trying to strong arm yourself into being one or the other, right? That just push harder and climb energy. Just let go and rest energy. But neither is working because you're using force instead of compassion. Strength in the tarot isn't about force. It's not about grinding or being tough. The Strength card shows a person that's gently holding a lion's mouth open, not through domination, but through calm inner power, through compassion, through the courage to be soft. Strength reverse means that somehow we've lost that. Or maybe we never had access to it because you were taught that strength means force. Here's what's been happening. You've been trying to strong arm yourself through the whole thing. Strong arm yourself into being productive enough, to resting correctly, to making a decision, strong arm yourself through the anxiety, through the paralysis, through the transformation. You've been trying to dominate yourself into being okay, into being strong, into having the answers, and it's not working. Because we can't force our way through a death and rebirth. We can't muscle our way through the solstice. You can't think your way or discipline your way or willpower your way into transformation. That lion is our own wild nature, our needs, our grief, our exhaustion. The lion, though, needs tenderness right now. It needs you to stop trying to control it and just be with it. I'm getting more chills. All the hairs on my arms are standing up. Strength reverse is what happens when you try to climb the mountain while ignoring that you're drowning in the ocean. Or when you try to dive into the ocean while beating yourself up for not climbing fast enough. We're depleted. We're running on E. And the harder we try to force the strength that we don't have, the more the strength stays reversed. The solstice is saying stop. Be gentle with yourself through the darkness. Stop demanding that you need to have it all figured out when the light starts to return. The death card in the subconscious is saying something has to end. Strength reverse is saying maybe what needs to end is the way we've been treating ourselves. That harshness, the criticism, the constant demand to do more, figure it out faster. What if the way between the mountain and the ocean isn't about pushing harder in either direction? What if it's about being so gentle with yourself that you can finally hear which way your soul actually wants to go? The Ace of Wands spark is still there, but you can't hold the new fire with hands that are clenched in fists, trying to control everything. The solstice is saying that rest is not weakness. Uncertainty is not failure. Grief isn't something to dominate. Exhaustion isn't something to override. Strength, real strength, is having the courage to admit when we're tired, to admit that we don't have all the answers, to admit that something is dying and you're scared and you don't know who you'll be on the other side. That's the strength that lets the light return. Not the strength that forces it, but the strength that trusts it. This reading, there's clearly potential here, but we're anxious about it. We're paralyzed by it. We're overthinking it because something is dying underneath. And you've completely exhausted ourselves trying to force our way through it instead of being tender with yourselves through it. The answer isn't more discipline or more rest. It's actually radical self-compassion. It's stopping the inner violence and finally being gentle with ourselves so that we can feel what is true. How does that land for you? How does that feel? For me, it seems really aligned, really on point with the solstice energy, you know? So here's what I think the solstice is really about. It's about giving ourselves permission to exist in the darkness without making it productive. We live in a culture that is so terrified of being still. We're told that winter is just something to get through until spring. That darkness is something to overcome, right? That rest is something to earn. But what if the darkness is teaching us something? What if the longest night is showing us what we can't see when we're constantly in motion? The mountain's still going to be there tomorrow, okay? Your goals, your ambitions, your to-do list, they're not going anywhere. But you need to be whole enough to actually climb. You need to have done the emotional work, the healing, the honest reckoning with what you actually want and why. You can't skip the ocean to get to the mountain. They're actually part of the same journey. So here's some things I want you to try this week. For the next week or so, I want you to do this experiment with me. I want you to notice every day when we're being the mountain goat, that productive, disciplined, climbing towards something. And then notice when you're being the fish, emotional, fluid, diving into how you actually feel. Okay? Don't judge either one. Don't try to change it. Just notice it. Notice when you're doing productivity because you're afraid to sit with how you actually feel. Notice when you're doing self care because you're avoiding something you generally want to work toward. I want you to just pay attention to that because most of us are performing one or the other. And I am with you. I'm with you. I'm in the collective with you. So I also have to notice when I'm performing one or the other. When am I performing ambition because I think I'm supposed to? Or when am I performing rest because I'm burned out? What would it look like to actually feel both, to genuinely want to build something and also genuinely need to cry about how hard it's been? Because both are true and we don't have to pick. The light's coming back, right? Starting yesterday, minute by minute, we're moving out of the darkness, but we're not there yet. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we're supposed to be here in this in between kind of space, between the mountain and the ocean, trying to figure out how do I honor both parts of myself? You're allowed to want things. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to be ambitious and tender and driven and scared and productive and completely fucking exhausted all at the same time. The mountain and the oceans are not enemies. They shape each other. They need each other. And you are both. You've always been both. Thanks for being here with me in the darkness. Thanks for choosing the tender journey, even when it could be just so much easier to keep climbing without feeling anything. Thanks for joining me today, and I can't wait till the next time we chat. I'll see you in the cards. Bye.